Welcome to Let's Talk Surrogacy, a podcast about the people, experiences, and decisions that shape the surrogacy journey. Today we have a very special guest, Madie. She's a 2-time surrogate, and we are just so excited to have you here. And let's just dive into, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you came from and growing up, and what led you into surrogacy.
Yeah, I was born in Kansas City, and I grew up in Peculiar, Missouri, with my mom and my dad and my brother and sister, who are twins. So that was just us three. And, we had an amazing life and a great childhood. And my very best friend did something just really incredible once for someone. And I thought, I want to do something incredible too. And she saved someone by donating her marrow for brain cancer. And I'm like, gosh, what could I do? And so I was on maternity leave with my second child, and I read an article about surrogacy, and it just moved me. I'm like, I want to do that. But I didn't say anything to my husband at first about it, just because I knew my brother and sister and I, so we were 3, and I knew I wanted 3 kids. So they like you to be done having your own family, just because anything can happen. Of course, there's lots of girls that go on and, have a surrogate baby and then have more babies of their own, and that's great. But just the risks are there. So whenever we had our 3rd child, I took him out to dinner because I knew he wasn't going to react badly, but I was like, it's kind of a big deal, asking to carry, said, okay, if your wife carries a whole human for someone. But he took it incredible. He literally was like, this does not surprise me that you would ask something like this. He goes, I did not know this was what you were going to be talking to me about, but it doesn't surprise me, and it's 1000% you. So that is what brought me to surrogacy.
So what I'm hearing, it sounds like you kind of got a little bit of envy, service and helping others envy from this friend. And we're like, how can I step up? What can I do? What's my role in the world to make it a better place or to make an impact and difference?
Yes.
And surrogacy just kind of fell into your lap, literally, while you were reading.
Literally.
And so that's pretty amazing that your husband had such a beautiful reaction to it. What do you think you'd have said if he was a little more apprehensive about it?
My husband is really supportive, and I always have so many ideas, throughout life, and he just kind of always takes them so good because he just never
just
knows.
rolls with it.
He rolls with it, yeah. And I'm like, I paint the picture, and he makes it happen, literally.
Wow.
He is great and always so supportive. So I can't really think of a negative thing that he would have said.
Now, how old were your children when this idea?
So the idea, I think my youngest was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
Because I jumped into it shortly after that. And there was a local agency here. It wasn't this one. I was very inexperienced, as most first-time surrogates are. And that's why a lot of us experienced surrogates are like, do your research. Yeah. And not that I had a great experience with them. It was great. But I just went with the first one that I saw. And I wanted it to be local because I knew traveling with smaller kids and my husband's job at the time would have been a little bit more difficult. And it just really worked out that I carried locally for the first time.
So you worked with the local agency here in town. What was that like? Walk me through, do you find them in the yellow pages or online? How did that work?
The yellow pages of cell phones.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like surrogate agencies near me.
Yeah.
And literally this agency popped up and I applied, and then I kind of got cold feet. And I feel like a lot of surrogates do that. And that's totally normal because it's a huge thing to really think about. There's so many factors that go into it, and it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And so she kept saying, Madie, are you still interested? I would love to talk. And I'm pretending I don't see her emails. And then finally, I just remember sitting in my car. I'm like, you know what? Yes, I know I want to do this. Everything, great things can be scary, and you just have to take it one step at a time. Emailed her back and said, okay, I'm sorry that I've ghosted you for like 2 or 3 months. I'm like, but I'm ready to move forward. And it was just really easy. She made it really easy. And that was great for me with being a first-time surrogate.
I bet. What were, if you don't mind me asking, some of those hesitations or things that made you sit back and say, I just don't know if I'm ready for this yet? What were those like?
Yeah, I honestly don't even know at that, like I wasn't even sure what I was really afraid of. I think, just the process and being so not educated and not really knowing what goes into it, doing a little bit of research. Everybody always thinks, oh, isn't there shots involved? I think that's kind of one of like the main things that a lot of surrogates ask and their questions. And yeah, shots are involved. So, definitely the medication part of it, but it was just the whole process in one, the time consuming. And once you get to a certain point, I mean, you're in it,
Yeah.
I don't want to say stuck because that's not the right term.
Right.
But
can't turn back.
But, you really have, and there's a lot of steps to get through before you even get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm really in this, that you can, have a change of heart. But
Sure.
yeah, trying new things and big things weren't always easy for me. So,
well, what is it that's saying, without big risks, there aren't great rewards. And,
right.
I would imagine, and, I obviously have not been a surrogate. Well, I guess it's not obvious, but I have not been a surrogate. So I'm not familiar with that process or the emotions that may come up when you're contemplating it or in the midst of it. But did you feel overwhelmed by the amount of information and steps and processes that like you were starting to kind of educate yourself around?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely overwhelming. I knew there was lots of steps. I think that I wasn't sure like how fast it would go. And to my surprise, I think at the time it didn't go as fast. And that I think that's a really good thing, especially for first-time surrogates, because you get to really know each step, have it explained and help along the way with, good case managers and people who are with you.
Can you take me back to when you were first matched with these intended parents and what that experience was like? And how did you know they were the right fit for you?
My first experience matching was incredible. Like I said, it was a local agency and it was a little bit different than how, the world has kind of turned virtual and there's lots of agencies and people are all over. But I got to go to the office and meet them in person after, of course, they saw my profile of me and a little bit about me and my family. So we met in this room and of course it's like, okay, who's going to break the ice here? This is a little bit, it can't help but just be awkward.
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah. I just felt really good with them. We were like, okay, what do we do now? Like,
it's a match.
Are we matched? And so they took us to lunch afterwards, and we just connected even more, and just felt really good about it. And we just kind of jumped from there. So,
was your husband with you when you went?
Yes, my husband was with me. So it was her and her husband, and then my husband and me. So.
Okay, gotcha. What are some things that are actually kind of important, or at least for you, that you felt a connection and a match with them?
For me, I just like to. I am a very non-confrontational person, and I just like to. I'm just a freely spoken person, very kind. I don't like having to have confrontations of any kind. So just the flow of the personality vibe, if I'm trying to explain the best way to describe it, but it just has to flow easily. So things that we have in common, I am a mom of 3 and I have 2 bonus kiddos. And at the time they were still in school. They're older now, but being understanding that I'm a mom and I'm really busy, and I, have to have time for them, but I also definitely make the time for, everything that I need to get done. So for them to just know that was really important to me. The same things that we enjoy, family. Really, I'm just a very family-oriented person. I don't do a lot of things outside of that besides work, just because that's where I wrap myself into is my kids.
That's your priority.
It is my priority.
Yeah.
And as long as I can be there for them and continue to do this, that makes me happy.
Well, and I think it's probably pretty important and was valuable in your case, correct me if I'm wrong, that you let them know that your family was your priority and that it wasn't like you were going to ignore them, but that that takes first place, and then everything else, you'll get back with them in a timely manner. I would imagine that if you had a very demanding intended, where they wanted daily reports and they wanted checking, where you felt a little overwhelmed with someone needing so much from you, that probably wouldn't have been a good fit.
It wouldn't have been for me. I don't do very well with demanding. Definitely just having that smooth, free, respectful boundaries was what was really important to me. And I did work a lot then too. And back then I wasn't doing what I do now. I worked in a restaurant setting, and I loved that didn't stray them away from choosing me, because I was a waitress.
Wow.
I was a waitress, and I worked a lot of hours. I worked doubles, and I was on my feet a lot. And, I really appreciated them understanding that too. So there could be intended parents out there that just have different preferences. So at that time in my life, this has been 7 years. I mean, she's 7, so this was like 9 years ago, because we had a little bit of a bumpy path to get her here. But yeah, so having them be okay with everything that I do and my day in and day out was really important.
Man, what was that like? Did you work all the way up until you delivered?
Yes, literally.
Wow.
38 weeks I was cleaning a table. And for any surrogates who have been servers, superheroes, because it's hard being pregnant on your feet, and that was the way that I provided for my family at the time, and it helped me because my husband was also in the restaurant business at the time, and we worked a lot of opposites. So when he was off, I worked doubles. That's how we didn't have to pay for daycare as much, and be able to spend time with our kids. And it was 38 weeks, and I was getting off my hands and knees from cleaning a table, and I threw the broom down, and I was like, I'm done. It's like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know who's going to clean that table, but it's not going to be me.
Yeah. Well, being a server is hard enough not being pregnant. So kudos to you for being able to go that long on a very physically demanding, and quite frankly, sometimes it can be kind of emotionally draining, when you have a lot of nasty customers. So
yes, I was very fortunate to have a lot of regulars, and a lot of my people that would come and see me, were regulars of mine, and they were very kind. But, you have those every now and again that were not.
Sure. One thing that just popped into my mind was I'm wondering, how old were your children this first round? So I know you said at 6 months you started looking into it.
So now I got to think. Okay, so my oldest at the time, she's 14 now. So she was, this was 15. So she was 5. So that would make my son 3 and then 6 months.
So you had really small children.
I did.
And how did you explain to them you just all of a sudden are pregnant? And I mean, how do you get a 5-year-old to grasp the concept of surrogacy?
Yeah. So my 5-year-old is an old soul. She still is to this day. Of course, she's 14 now. And I just told her, I was like, mommy's going to help bring a baby into this world for another family, but we're just going to take care of this baby and, nurture it and watch he or she grow. And then whenever the baby's born, we're going to give it to that family because they couldn't have a baby. I was like, you have your brother and you now have your little baby sister, and we're going to do the same thing so this family can have a baby. And she I don't know that she fully understood the whole concept, but I mean, she understood enough.
Sure.
And then my son, in my middle, he didn't even know.
Right.
He's just like, Mom's big again.
Yeah. She just gained a little weight.
Yeah.
So I know you said you've been matched 4 different times. I would love to know some of the unique experiences from each match and situation, if you don't mind maybe going into that for me.
My first journey matched, we've touched on that. And so they had 5 embryos, and they were also untested.
And when you say untested, can you explain that to somebody who doesn't know much about this?
With these embryos, they were not genetically tested, which means they were not checked to see if there was anything that was wrong with them, anything that wasn't normal. And they were graded by A, B, all the way down to C. I personally did not, do my research like with my first journey and take a deeper dive into the genetic testing of embryos. So since these were not genetically tested, I just like to point out that sometimes it's not a bad thing, because we have a perfectly beautiful 7-year-old girl. So our first embryo transfer was a single embryo transfer. I had a successful positive blood pregnancy test, and my numbers were more than doubling perfectly. We went in for our scheduled 6-week heartbeat, and the heartbeat was there. It was great. And then we just went in for a routine, just check on baby, and it was soul crushing and just heartbreaking when there was no heartbeat. And I'll just never forget that day. Laying there, it's like the room was just so cold, and I could just feel the heartbreak. It honestly makes you want to cry, even thinking about it. But yeah, it was just a really hard thing for that mom to go through.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It does sound like I can't imagine what it feels like to have so much pressure to deliver, this, I don't want to say product, but like you've been entrusted with a very valuable commodity, these embryos, and then for it not to stay.
Right. And, you're so excited, and we had a heartbeat, and it was just walking in there and just being so we didn't even see it coming.
Yeah.
That's what was so just earth shattering. The intended dad, was comforting his wife, and then he looked over at me. I'm like, no, not in a disrespectful way, but comfort your wife. I'm like, you guys, once again, just the odds, are just kept just seeming less and less, for them. And it's like we were back to square one. But I ended up having a DNC where they went and just made sure everything was, out and that I was good. We jumped back into another cycle and did a double embryo transfer. And of course, with these 2 embryos, the grade was even less than the first one. And again, positive pregnancy test, everything was looking really good. And then I remember having just a really big bleed. And I just knew, that something wasn't right. So I had went in and they saw a sac, but they only saw one. So I'm like, well, maybe both took, and one just didn't. And so we were hopeful that when I went back, there would be a sac still, but then I had another that happened again. And I just knew.
And this is same couple.
Same couple. We did a double embryo transfer the second time. So that resulted in an early on miscarriage because we had positive pregnancy tests. And then we took a little bit of time just to kind of intervene and see, just give my body a break.
Yeah.
And then we jumped into another cycle a couple months later. This time I had a drop cycle. I was like, are you serious?
What's a drop cycle?
So a drop cycle is where something goes wrong during the medication cycle. In my case, I ovulated through my medication. Now they use Lupron a lot, and I'm sure this was even maybe used, before, but for me, it was not on my list of medications. And whenever surrogates are fertile, sometimes we can just ovulate through those medications. So I had to stop all meds once again and then start it over again. And then we vamped up for June 5th, 2017 transfer. And I'll never forget the day because my husband and the intended father showed up wearing the same exact outfit. And we were like, what? Like literally the same cargo shorts, the same shirt, wasn't planned. And I'm like, this has to be good luck, right?
Yeah.
So we get there And they're like, okay, we're ready for you to come back. And they realized that they only thawed one embryo and we were supposed to have 2 embryos thawed. And I'm like, what is going on? So of course, us surrogates, we have to go in with a full bladder for embryo transfer, just for positioning. And so I had to lay there with a full bladder to wait about 45 minutes for the embryo to thaw. So then we did the embryo transfer and I went home and we waited for the 14 days and I did a blood pregnancy test and it was positive. And I went back and 2 days after that did another one and it was it more than like quadrupled. It was so high. They told me, you don't need to come back. You're pregnant. And now she is a perfectly healthy 7-year-old girl. And, she was the ugly embryo, or the lowest grade. So point being, just because embryos aren't graded doesn't mean that they're not good. And I'm so glad that we did another transfer, even though we were just really feeling discouraged. But I'm just such a positive person, even through like really hard times. So I'm like, it's going to happen. And it was just, I've never prayed so much in my life, I don't think. After it took, I was like, please let it keep going. Please let it keep going. And my intended mom and I, every week we would make it to another week. We'd be like 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 13 weeks, 20 weeks.
Right.
It was just incredible. And, it just really, I just hope that it gives certain surrogates hope,
Was there ever a moment maybe that you felt or you thought maybe they felt like that you weren't the right one for them to do this? Or did they just really believe you were meant to carry their baby?
I believe that they really thought that I was meant to carry their baby.
Yeah.
And they went above and beyond for me. They were truly great people. I had mentioned that I was a server. They did not think that my job was the problem. But once they found out I was pregnant, they didn't want me to work for like the first trimester. They just wanted me to take it easy. Not even because they thought they just wanted every precaution that they could take. Sure. Because I was, everything was looking really good and, the heartbeat was there and we kept on making it. And so they just paid me lost wages, that was outside of my contract.
Wow.
I know. And just took care of me. And I'll just never forget my intended mom saying to her husband in the lobby, like, it's just another drop in the bucket, right? Just wanting it so bad. Yeah. And it was just, I felt bad. I'm like, I hope they don't think that because I was a server, this was happening. But I know they didn't. Yeah. Because people wait tables all the time, pregnant, and surrogates, or bartenders or servers or on their feet, nurses, moving people but it was just an incredible full circle, moment. So,
well, you are very precious to them. I'm sure that they did want to really make sure that you were well taken care of, as they should. You're doing a huge, invaluable service for someone. And clearly, if they could do it themselves, they would. But they're very reliant on their surrogates to see this through. And I think that it's really beautiful that they were such a lovely couple.
Yeah, they are incredible. And I'm still in contact with them. And
I was going to ask. So now, is that with how many you've done 2 actual completions?
Yes.
Or what's the term you would use for that?
I've completed 2 journeys.
Okay.
So they were my first journey. And, I feel like they made my skin thick too for all the good reasons, to not give up.
Yeah.
Just because, science is behind it, but it's not always perfect.
Right.
And, if it's meant to be, it will be. And I know some people don't like when they hear that, like, everything it's meant to be for a reason. It's like, what is the silver lining in this? But I just knew I wasn't going to give up and they weren't going to give up. And I'm glad they didn't give up on me.
Yeah.
Because we had such a perfect journey once I got pregnant. Like, it was smooth sailing and we did a gender reveal. I did a gender reveal for them. And we found out it was, a girl. I actually got to find out. They let me know first, and then I did a gender reveal for them. But yeah, so we had a great journey.
And it sounds like you are still in communication with this family? And how often do you speak with them? And what level of involvement do you have in their life? And
so I've been invited to her birthday parties, and I feel terrible. And I feel like, I haven't been able to make everyone that I've been invited to for her, because life, or she's a February birthday, weather, can be not great. And they've been to my house for my daughter's birthday. I went to their house just to say hi and hang out with the Surrobabe and the family. And they send me cards on my birthday and our anniversary. Like they never skip a beat. They text me Happy Mother's Day. It's the perfect communication, to where I feel like there's not a bar that's set. It's just respectful boundaries. And some people have extreme communication, and I think that's wonderful. And if they wanted more, I would definitely even give more. But it's just nice because, everyone has lives. Yeah. You don't feel bad if you're like not reaching out all the time. Yeah. Yes. And it's their baby, Right. And it's that, it's I have a connection with her, but it's not my baby. So
now, out of curiosity, and she's still a little young, but are they planning to share the surrogacy journey with her? Or?
She knows.
She does.
She knows. She the intended dad has made certain comments about so mommy's my mom, but Madie carried me.
That's probably a lot for a little kid to wrap their head around.
Yeah. So my journey is a little unique. After that one. Of course, it was unique to begin with because of all the transfers that we did, but it ended beautifully. So I rematched to do a second journey with another local couple, and they were amazing. I'm not going to dive too deep into it because there wasn't, we didn't end up having a baby out of this one. They did have tested embryos, and we did 2 embryo transfers initially. The first embryo transfer was just a flat fail. And I was devastated because I had never seen just a not pregnant pregnancy test. But, it ended up just not taking. And that was really hard because I'm like, my gosh, all my other pregnancies at least took, that ended in a miscarriage. So it was really hard to grasp that. But I stayed positive, and we just got excited for another transfer.
How quickly in this case, did they go back to do that?
So after you find out that a transfer doesn't take, they will have you stop medication. You will have a cycle, and then they will send you another med calendar. Some clinics, I think, vary on how long in between, but typically it's always you just have a period and then you jump into another medication cycle. And you're on meds for about 3.5 weeks. So we went ahead and did that. And then we had another transfer, and it was a chemical pregnancy. And what that is where the embryo takes, but it doesn't grow. So my HCG, the hormone level, whenever it came back, was 35. And I was that is so low. Mine were always in the 500s or higher. So I just instantly knew. I stayed cautiously optimistic. But I knew that I knew my body, and that it wasn't, wasn't good. And it ended up not. The second blood draw it had went down. So again, we stopped medication, and at this point they were out of embryos. Oh. And so they asked me if I would wait and for them to make more embryos. And I did. And we ended up having another transfer. We switched clinics, and I did get pregnant. And it just didn't make it past. There was no heartbeat ever. I think we probably got to about 5 weeks, but we went in for heartbeat confirmation, and there was just no heartbeat. So there was
that would have been the third.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. After the third didn't take, I just decided that I couldn't move forward anymore. Yeah. And I had followed my contract, and we could have stopped at 2 because that's all they had left. I just chose not to move forward.
Well, a very emotional experience, and that disappointment, not only for them, but it's hard to probably not take that on, you know?
And she was just, I just feel like it took a toll on her.
Sure.
And when things take tolls on people, sometimes unintentionally, they can take tolls on surrogates too.
Yeah.
You know, and for surrogate, I'm sure I'm not the only surrogate out there that has felt that way.
Yeah.
So it was unfortunate. And to that point, it kind of, I don't want to say soured, but I just felt like it needed to, like boundaries needed to be set. And I didn't even really want to have contact with her after that. And it wasn't out of any kind of like awful spot in my heart or anything. Like it wasn't I wasn't mad. It was stressful. And there was just a lot of things.
Very emotional.
It was very emotional.
Yeah.
Yes. It was a really hard one for me. So then I took a break for a while. I took a break. Really wasn't going to do it again. And then I have a friend of mine whose best friend reached out to me and actually knew this girl. And she said that there was a local couple that were trying to go independent. So they're like, you are experienced. So like, surrogacy, and would you be interested? And I'm like, I don't know, like, I mean, I've always loved surrogacy and I just didn't want it to be the end for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me think about it for a while. And then I decided that I would have a conversation with my husband and be like, how do you feel about this? Like, I know we've been through a lot. I know the last journey, didn't end up having a baby and it was a little difficult, more challenging. But what do you think about possibly going independent? Just meeting them for lunch. Like, let's just see how it goes. And we went to lunch and we ended up really liking them. And she could not carry because she had struggled with her weight. She was on very diet curving medication that was just not safe for her to carry. So she was seeking surrogacy. And they had a budget, of course. And, it is not all about the money. And I was willing to, try and help them out as much as I could. And at the time, I had insurance that was surrogacy friendly. However, it's what we call like a silent policy. Like, it didn't say yes or no. Since it was friendly, we went ahead and moved forward. That was like a motivator for them because it would save money not having to purchase a plan. And my comp, I just set a little bit lower, like what we could, agree on. And so we started the process and everything was going good. The mom was so sweet. I felt like the dad, he was very nice, but it's like whenever you go into independent journeys, even as experienced you are, sometimes they can just be a little bit more difficult because you don't have people with you every step of the way, to help you through things. Of course, I had lawyers had my lawyer, and I had fertility clinic, and we had our psychological evaluations, and I had someone behind me, but there's still certain things that sometimes it's nice to have support on. Mm-hmm. We got held up because he wanted documentation on, the policy. He wanted like something written out by the insurance. And it was just, I gave him everything I could. And I felt like it was never enough. And it was very stressful. And I was doing everything that I could. And so we didn't transfer. We waited a few months until like the new year to see if something would change. And it didn't. So we ended up transferring, and it was a fail. It was just like, once again, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why? What am I doing wrong? I have carried my own children. I have carried a surrogate baby. I don't understand. So of course we stopped medications and jumped back into a cycle, and they had 2 embryos left. And one of them was just not as great. But like I had kind of mentioned before, it's hard for parents to make that decision to just discard it. Yeah. So we went ahead and just did both. We transferred both. And I had a chemical pregnancy, which is where it took, but numbers just weren't rising. And at that point, I just felt like I was really exhausted, but in my mind, I'm just like, it is not me. And sometimes I think it's like, is that selfish of me to think because I've went through now 2 different families? Like, if I think about even trying it again, like, am I just wasting time? Like, is it truly me? Is something wrong with my body? So I took some time and just, stepped away from it, told them like they weren't going to move forward. And then they decided that they did want to move forward. But I said I was just sorry. Like I couldn't. So I thought to myself, I'm like, I just feel like it's not the end for me. Like, I know that sounds bad, but I just felt like, but at the same time, I felt guilt. Am I being inconsiderate, of like another parent, of them wasting money, particularly?
Okay, that's what I was trying to get clarity around. How do you feel guilt?
Trying to clarify that too, and trying to wrap my words into that. And that's how I felt. If I were to, match with intended parents, am I just setting them up to fail? I don't want them wasting money on me if I am not good, and a lot of us surrogates, I feel like we kind of get labeled as damaged goods.
Sure.
If you've had like a bad track record. So I reached out to a few different agencies, and honestly, a couple of them were like, I told them my whole story. I said, listen, this is my laundry list. This is what's happened to me. And one of them was just like, we really appreciate your honesty. Like, we really value that in surrogates who are like not being dishonest about their journey. So I ended up saying, you know what? I know it's not me. It can't be me. Like, right? Like I've had a baby through surrogacy with ugly embryos, right? On the third try. So I carried ugly embryo, right?
Yeah.
Into a perfect, beautiful girl. And then I've had 3 of my own. I was like, no, it is not me. So I was taken a chance on by an agency, and I just wanted to redo everything. I was slightly, I don't want to say traumatized, but I was slightly like jaded, I guess, by a heterosexual couple where the mom was using her own eggs, because I wasn't sure if it was like something with me. I just wanted to change everything. So I told my husband, I said, I want to carry for a same-sex couple. I want to carry for 2 dads who have an egg donor, where, this person, like doesn't have, their eggs are good. They have been proven, to have successful pregnancies, and maybe this will work. And it's no disrespect to, intended moms whatsoever. It was just like a personal thing for me because of my story and what I've went through. I matched with 2 dads, and they had an egg donor, and they used their sperm, and we had a great meeting. We clicked really well, and we had our first transfer, and it took first time.
Yes.
First time. Little bit of a crazy then I was being tested. I had my HCG drawn on my birthday, and it was like 75. I'm like, okay, 75. Like it's low, but
not bad.
I was feeling hopeful. I was like,
Right.
It's not lower than that. So I go 2 days later, and it only crawled 7 points.
Oh, wow.
And everyone thought it was going to be a chemical. The doctor called me and was like, Madie, like, it's not looking great, but it's still a positive. So we're just going to give it the weekend, and then you're going to come back on Monday. I prayed so hard in those times. I was like, this is not happening again. I'm like, I just made the worst mistake. What was I thinking? I went back on Monday, and it was like 200 and something.
Hallelujah.
And then they had me do 6 blood draws just to make sure. And then it just kept going up and up. And he's like, you're pregnant. So
you could take a breath.
Yes, we could take a breath. And she's 6 months old.
Wow.
And perfect.
What a journey.
I know.
I would say you've been through a lot.
Yes. And I love my journey and all the imperfections because I get to tell it. And I think like the take that I have on mine is it's not always the surrogate. The embryo has to do its job too. And, we do as much as we can. We take our medicine the way that we should. We go to all of our doctor's appointments. We do everything by the book. We drive ourselves crazy making sure that everything is perfect, down to the shots and having everything in your pill bottle and making sure you're ordering your medication so you don't run out, and planning things around med time and everything. And so, it's been quite a few years, but I am grateful that I got to experience it another time. And if I'm hopeful, I have one more journey that I would like to do.
I was just getting ready to say, $1 million question. Are you going to do it again?
I don't know why I feel like I should be secretive and be like, no, I'm not. Yes,
you are.
I absolutely want to do it again. I would love to do a sibling journey for my dads, but they're getting the full parent experience right now.
Yeah.
With no sleep. And she's only 6 months old, but I don't know. Like, I don't
Are
know.
they in town too?
No, they live in Denver.
Okay.
Yep. So it's the first time I traveled too, like this whole, I switched everything this last time, started from scratch, like completely different.
Yeah. But with all the wealth of knowledge that you had carried with you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It was. Yeah. And I'm so grateful every day. And it just goes to show you that just because you have chemicals and fails doesn't mean that us surrogates are damaged goods.
Yeah.
Like, we truly can be the perfect vessel.
Well, and you're a human being too.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes maybe that gets lost along the way, in that you're, just this vessel that's carrying. And it's like, no, I'm a real human being with feelings, and I take on the energy and the emotions of what happens if it is a fail, that
right.
Even though I had nothing to do with it, it doesn't mean I don't have the same emotional response. Maybe not the same, but
right.
You know what I'm saying.
And I feel like in the surrogacy world, people can have, like, girls have their own opinions. And I just feel like I hear them in the back of my head right now. Be like, she shouldn't have done it. She shouldn't have taken that risk. And what is life without risks?
Right.
And I felt good about it because I felt confident that it wasn't me. Now, if I had never had a surrogate baby, it would have been different. But because I had proven to have one with untested embryos, I just knew that it couldn't have been me. So, it's just holding out hope for other surrogates that are maybe stuck in the same boat. And, I know that agencies and fertility clinics can be a little bit difficult, on approving us because what we look like on paper.
Sure.
But it's not always bad.
Yeah. So I know you had mentioned that you've done both independent and with an agency. What would you say, which do you prefer and why?
I prefer an agency. I know that independent, it definitely saves money for the intended parents on that side. And I totally respect that in every aspect. But agencies just hold your hand from the very beginning, and they do a lot of the legwork for you. And they don't miss any steps. And you're not ever left wondering which way, to go with questions. So for me, it's an easy answer to say agency.
I'm hearing that a lot as I've been interviewing other surrogates, and it really feels like the agencies, or at least with this agency, that they really wrap so many services around both the intended parent and the surrogate, and that it just makes the whole process feel more like a family type, that you're all in it together. And
yeah, it does. And unlike my first journey, it was a very mom and pop. I don't feel like I really had like a caseworker, like it was just different than an actual agency with caseworkers. And whenever I did my journey with mine, I really got close to my caseworker. We even bonded and had a connection, and she was just really supportive. And I feel like going through this, you just really need that support person. Like, say there may be a tiff. It doesn't happen, but it definitely can. People can have disagreements, and they can have things that came up that maybe they didn't think about chatting about. You just never know what can come up. But with an agency, you have people behind you. You have your caseworker. You have other people in the agencies that are even higher up than the caseworker that can intervene and really help navigate any situation to go whichever way. Versus independent, you really only have your attorney, if you think about it. And it's like, who's going to talk for you? Who's going to be your voice if you don't necessarily like something during the independent journey? And with an agency, there's checklists, and like I said before, everything is just already in place with a process, and it's very thought out and drawn out, and they make sure you have every T crossed and every I dotted.
Yeah, very streamlined.
Yes, and they make it easy for you.
So I'd love to know what it was like in delivery and seeing these intended parents with their baby for the first time, and knowing that you were the catalyst that made that all happen.
Yeah. So since I've had two journeys, there's two stories. My first story is uneventful, which is good. We always love uneventful, right? So we went in on Valentine's Day and I was induced at 39 weeks and she was perfect. And whenever she was born, it was just, I'll never forget the mom, like everyone just kind of just getting naked, like they started ripping their shirts off, like for skin to skin. And she literally, whenever the baby was born, she hugged me and said, thank you before she even held her baby. And I was like, what are you doing? Why don't you hug me later? Like it's your baby. And just having them sit there in the chair and just do the skin to skin and, just soak in that first moments with baby was just incredible. Like,
well, I could see the emotion in your, like it's taking you right back there. How beautiful that is.
It is. It was just incredible. And like for us, our journey was unique and it was longer. It was, it took a really long time. And sometimes journeys take that, it is not promised that you're going to start and get through your stuff and have a baby in a year or a little over a year. Ours took over 2 but it was all worth it. It was all beautiful and it was so moving. And everybody, like nurses were crying in the room. And one of the nurses was like, this is the first time I've ever seen a surrogacy like delivery. And the mom was really sweet and made me a goodie bag and I had a robe and slippers and, my favorite snacks. And she was just really thoughtful and gave me a necklace with a bean on it because we called her Bean like the whole way through the pregnancy because we didn't know if she was boy or girl for a while. And she just kind of stuck. And I got her a little onesie that said Bean. So it was just really sweet. And if I could go back and relive it every day, I would. It was just great.
I'm sure that's what makes you want to continue to do this
the
service.
End result.
Yeah.
Yeah, the end result. It's like you do all the hard work and go through all the obstacles. And it's like it just makes it all worth it. It may only take like a couple hours, but it's like it makes all those years or months, totally worth it.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a lot of surrogates and I know there's surrogates out there that'll be like, she's so right. But like before you even left the hospital, you're like, when can I do it again? When can I do this again? So yeah. And then my second journey, I carried for 2 dads and they were in Denver. And so I was older. It's about 7 years in between births with each surrobabe. So I was geriatric. And I was like, this is so stupid. I'm geriatric. Like I have to go to these non-stress tests to like, monitor the baby. I was like, I'm not old. That's so silly. But I will never have that feeling again because I went in for my 38-week stress test. So I had one at 37, 38, 39, and then if I was going to go to 40, which we knew I was going to be induced at 39 regardless, so we could make sure everyone was going to be there, especially since they were in Denver. I went in at 38 weeks, and I hadn't really felt that good that day. Like I felt just kind of different, and I felt like I had not felt her move as much, but they get bigger. Yeah. You're not really sure. And I knew I was going for my stress test, so I'm like, well, just look there and see what's going on. And they strapped me up to the monitor and they saw her heart rate dip. And I was like, that scared me. Sure. So of course, then naturally my blood pressure was a little high. So then of course they're like, oh, your blood pressure. I'm like, no, I'm just nervous because you're making me nervous. Yeah. Like my blood pressure is fine. I always have
You're at the finish line.
Yes. I'm like, I am calm.
Yeah.
The doctor came down and said, Madie, you're already 38 weeks. Your baby's looks good, but I just don't like that her heart rate dipped. So how about we have a baby today? And I was like, oh, and my husband even said, I had a feeling when you walked out the door today, I should have went with you. So they took me upstairs and I called the dads and he's like, you just got me out of a meeting. Thanks. And they're like, bags were already in the car. And I said, everything's fine. Like baby's heart rate is fine. So we wait to hold off on the induction a little bit just to make sure, just in case I get induced and if I speed up quick, because they're 10 hours from me in Denver from Kansas City. So they get there and they finally really start speeding up the process. And it took me a while, but then once it was ready, it was go time. And her heart dipped again, like towards the very end. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then they couldn't find it. And I was like, I started like losing it. I was like, where's her heartbeat? And like the dads are like, it's okay. Just calm down. Cause I don't know. I just like saw the worst flash before my eyes. And turns out her cord was wrapped around her neck that is why her heart rate dipped. So those non-stress tests that surrogates can be like, why do I have to do that?
Yeah.
It potentially was a lifesaver in my situation.
That's really good information to, I think, for potential surrogates to hear. Some of the things that seem like just overkill.
Yeah,
and just
like,
a lot,
why do we need that?
That they're there for a good reason.
Whenever she was born, it was just, I felt such a relief. And the dads just were like, oh my gosh, like just took her immediately and loved on her and did the skin to skin. And I this time, I was very moved and I was so excited, but I think I was coming down from just being slightly shaken up from just the cord and everything. I was like, what just happened? But it was just still an incredible thing. And unlike my first surrogate baby, I did not breastfeed in the hospital, but this time around I got to. So I got to hold baby and feed her and really get to kind of enjoy those moments, even though it didn't make me any more attached to her, but it was just a little moment that I got to have with her. And they wanted that, they wanted that initial colostrum, from me to her, because they're big on immune systems and what's good for babies. So
after everything that you have gone through and all of your surrogacy journeys, what would be one thing you would share with the surrogate or potential surrogate to help them not get discouraged?
Science is not perfect. There are definitely steps along the way that maybe it's not going to happen the first time. And those steps can be earth-shattering and soul-crushing at times. And you are an incredible human being for doing what you're doing. And I know firsthand that it's really hard, that you have some situations that, some people don't think that it affects a surrogate because, we're supposed to be like a tough one and we're strong, but, it's okay for you to cry.
Yeah, you're a human being.
You're a human. It's okay for you to have feelings and to feel discouraged, but don't give up. Literally do not give up. You just have to. One thing I always told myself through all of the trials and tribulations and roadblocks in my journey is I just always stayed positive, just always think about the next step and look ahead, that it's going to happen. And sometimes you can be stuck on something that happened, but it doesn't do you any good because it doesn't change anything. Yeah. The only thing you can do is put it behind you and put one foot forward and just keep going. And, definitely utilize your support that you have. Those groups out there, if you're in a transfer group, the girls in the transfer group, your caseworker, it's important to have a village.
Yeah.
And it is a hard thing, but we can do hard things, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's so much bigger than just you and your emotions. That this really is a huge impact in the world, and being able to move through those difficult, challenging times and move through the discouragement. Sounds like it's all worthwhile.
Yes. And another thing I will say is if you have those gut feelings, sometimes you're put in situations where things at first seem great, and then maybe something doesn't. And it's don't just not listen to them. If you have questions, ask the questions. If you feel something is weird, act on it, say something. Don't let things bottle up inside of you, because it's best to get it off your chest and be like, hey, I'm just thinking about something and it's just kind of been stewing. I want to run this by you. Am I being, because there's been situations where I'm like, am I being, over dramatic about this or no? And, your caseworker will be like, no, you're not being over dramatic. This is what happened to you. And it's your feelings are valid, and it's okay to feel that way. And, utilize your support.
So I'm also hearing you say to really trust your intuition and your instincts.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that necessarily it's always spot on, but to really make sure that you're asking questions if they arise and not worrying about how that may seem or hurting someone's feelings, but to really trust yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at the end, it's you and yourself, right?
Yeah. If you could sum up your surrogacy journey in one word or a phrase, what would it be?
unique. Yeah, definitely unique. Not everyone's is ever the same. There's those girls, and I love those girls, and I love this for you when it happens first time, and you know, like everything is smooth sailing, and that's so incredibly amazing. You know, to just not have to go through some of the things, you know, that you go through, and that is incredible. I wish that, you know, at times would have been me, but you know, my journey was unique, and it was not like most. And I'm proud of that. You know, like it gave me the knowledge, and it made me a stronger person too. And it taught me that not everything happens on the first time. Sometimes you just have to keep giving it goes, you know, because not everybody has success the first time in anything that they do. And that's okay.
Well, I just really appreciate you taking time from your busy life to come in here and talk to us. Not only are you a very resilient woman, but you're also a very courageous woman. And I think what you have done and what you continue to do is so valuable. And I just really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great sharing my story.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll always share it, and it's part of me. So,
well, keep sharing.
I will.
Okay. Thanks, Madie.
You're welcome.